Hey everyone, Drew Apiary here. It is November the 8th. It is late in the afternoon, super warm here in this part of Georgia. I think the high is 80, so unseasonably warm, despite the fact that most of October felt appropriate. I know it's been a bit since my last upload. I haven't had time to do many uploads anymore. I'm lucky to get, seems like, one a quarter, or one every few months at this point. But we're out here at the big tree and we're just doing some 2-to-1 syrup feeding. So these hives, last time I checked them was in probably early mid-October, and they were looking really good across the board here in Georgia. I'm sorry, I don't really want to speak for everyone, but at least for my area, just north of Atlanta, most of my hives in the various yards, they've done reasonably well. We had a decent fall flow, tons of goldenrod that was out this year. I saw a lot of pollen come in, and I did see nectar, but as usual, didn't put a whole lot of weight from that. I've been feeding them nonstop really since July, usually trying to come out every 3 weeks to top off their internal feeders. But only a month ago did we switch over to 2-to-1, just due to the temperatures getting colder. Was not expecting November to be this warm. I honestly didn't even expect that I'd be out here doing liquid feed this time of the year, because normally after Halloween I do not do liquid feeding unless it's warm. So kind of a blessing in disguise. I'd rather it not be this temperature, but for the bees' sake, this will really help them out a lot putting on weight, and these hives are in no danger of that. So I'm gonna go grab my stuff, get started, and let's dive into one of these hives. All right, we'll start with this one right here. All right, that's looking pretty good right there. This is my first year, just for convenience, instead of putting in storage, I've been leaving my queen excluders just underneath the telescoping lids. So just makes things a lot easier when we get into the spring. Because we had some cold weather, that's why I pulled them. The one downside is, as you all can tell, this is a super. So I've kind of allowed a queen to get up into the super and just throughout the winter months. Not ideal, it's just the equipment I had. I always, if you have the equipment to overwinter without using a super, I would, unless you're trying to, I personally feel like the optimal is to either do a single deep or a double deep body to overwinter with, and just save your supers for when they're needed. But I just had supers that I didn't want to harvest, and I wanted the bees to have the honey. And you can kind of tell right now, they're looking pretty good in there. This hive is heavy. So, but queen is probably going to get up here at some point in the next few months. She's probably going to lay, and the reason why you got to watch out for that is because when you put these in storage, anywhere the queen has laid are usually going to be wax moth territory for what they could damage. So just food for thought. Let's see. Like I said, this yard has been doing very well overall, so very pleased with that. Not a big hive beetle problem, not really much of a pest problem. We didn't lose any hives due to varroa, no dead outs, no swarms. So very, very pleased out here. But yeah, honestly, They all got their formic a little later than I would have liked. I think I didn't do formic just due to temperatures until late September, going into early October. So, you know, there was a brood break. Then would have liked to have given them formic sooner. But again, this yard fortunately didn't have any issues with it. Whereas I had another yard where I had some dead outs, probably due to Varroa. And we've just been very lucky here. So yeah, I'm just gonna move through this yard, knock all these out. I'll try to see if I can pull a frame maybe out of that one, so y'all can see if we've got any brood this time of the year here in early getting into mid-November, and stop if anything else stands out. All right, something I just wanted to pause and go over real quick is feeding. So, you know, as I mentioned, almost all these hives have an internal feeder and have had an internal feeder since the end of our, you know, spring nectar flow. So really since mid-June, we have been internally feeding on visits. I can't think of a time. There might have been, the only times I wouldn't have fed would have been during a formic treatment. So, you know, I'm out here, whether I'm doing 1-to-1, in this case, the past month has been 2-to-1, which I mentioned earlier. If you've watched my previous videos, you know that when I usually switch over in the winter months, we know that bees are going to stop taking liquid feed once temps start getting below 50 degrees. And that's usually when I switch over to something harder. You know, some people use fondant or some sort of hard candy for the bees to eat. I have had great success just taking normal granulated sugar, as you see right here. And obviously in its just normal granulated form, the bees are not going to take it. If I left it like this, for the most part, they would just remove it from the hive and it would be a waste. But as humidity rises through the telescoping inner cover, right? Or just the inner cover, I should say, and this area is contained, this will start to have moisture get into the granulated sugar and start to harden it. I like to expedite that process. Start to spray it. So that way it has a head start. Now, you see, if you've also watched my previous videos, I'm usually, you kind of see these ventilation holes here that I've cut there with a hole saw, there and here under this. I put some mesh wire screen. Normally I'm using a round internal feeder in here. If you watch my previous videos, I have a bunch of them in storage. I'm gonna be honest, they're great. I think they're the way to go, but I've also just, hate to say, I've been finding ways to be more efficient in the field, and this has worked fine for me too. So this isn't necessarily the best way to feed your bees, but you can take anything from newspaper, hard magazine paper. It's probably even gonna be better because it's not, moisture's not gonna leak through. This newspaper's not gonna last all season long. You know, but that's why it's also key that as you do put this on here, you want to put it somewhere that if it does start to leak, it's not going to leak through into the cluster down in here. Because if you get cold, you know, moisture like water dripping down into here, and that drips on the bees in the middle of winter, they're dead. So, you know, you have to make sure if you're going to do this, position it in such a way that it's not going to do that. So I'm going to rearrange this in a second. But I just wanted to bring it up that you can also, another thing I've done is, instead of doing this newspaper, you can just surround the hole with sugar. So, you know, the wood, I've gotten many seasons out of an inner cover. I've very rarely had to replace them, but if this does get very moist and wet over time, it is going to rot and break apart. If you do what I'm about to propose, it's going to probably expedite that process of these needing to be replaced, but not by an absurd amount. Maybe you'll have to replace them every few years. But you can also just put dry sugar like on here. So like basically just right on the inner cover, right? Like make a pile of it and just surround the hole and then wet that. And then as it's hard, the bees will climb up here, they'll come feed on it, and that'll be emergency feed. So, you know, another thing to keep in mind, don't put too much in here that you can't close the lid with your telescoping cover, because this will not work. If this can't properly seat as heat rises, it's going to leak out the sides, and you're not going to get what we're trying to do here, which is to make this hard and you know, basically not like a slush, but essentially like a hard candy for them to feed on. If any air can escape and the bees aren't able to seal it up with propolis, the whole process isn't going to work. So round top feeders are great. this is just a lazier way if you don't want to buy them. It's another way to feed your bees. So only other thing I wanted to bring out with feeding under the inner cover is I'll have some people ask me about, what do you do about ants? So again, it's very warm right now in Georgia. Ants are still going to be out when you've got warm days. So, you know, there is always that risk that, you know, hey, I just put a bunch of sugar underneath the lid. Should I worry about ants? You may, and it may be something you need to monitor. I personally have only had one large ant attack where it was so bad that it really did throw off the hive, but I've never lost a hive to ants, and you're not going to find many beekeepers that will. Usually ants are going to just steal, take advantage of a weak hive, dead out, etc. But I've very rarely found ants just in the hive taking over. So in this scenario of feeding dry sugar under the lid, the worst thing that could happen is you could have some ants get up in there, either try to set up shop or try to steal all that. But you know, for the most part, the bees, if they're a strong colony, they will keep them out, prevent them from doing that. So I just wouldn't worry too much about it. It's going to get cold here probably in the next week or so. But normally when I do feed the way you just saw, it's usually when it's already cold. I just don't see when I'm going to be out here next. And so I'm trying to get both an internal liquid feed on. Once it gets too cold, they're going to finish that in the next couple days. They have the emergency feed for the next couple weeks. I top off that emergency feed maybe once a month, sometimes even longer than that over the next couple months. All right, let's go into one more. We'll go into this one just because it's a double deep body. And let's just take a look at how they are. Since I haven't really pulled out a frame of bees for y'all. It is a beautiful day to do it. And next visit I'm out here, it's probably gonna be too cold to do what I'm about to do, which is not only break the brood nest, but show you how our bees are looking. I see one beetle. See if I can get him. Got him, he's dead. This yard does not usually have a problem with beetles. That's probably one of the first ones I've seen in a while. So let's see if our queen in here, if she's doing anything on this section of the hive. I'd say not a ton of bees up top, maybe 5 or 6 seams of bees. So it's not slammed, but it's definitely got some weight. This is largely all nectar. I'll show you in the light. There are some eggs up here, so she has been laying. A little hard to tell in the video, but she's been up in here. So you got all that. Which last time I was out here, guys, was about, again, it's like early mid-October. I did feed them then. Very possible that that's, you know, it's kind of tough to tell when you have dark comb if that's honey or not, but it doesn't seem to have much movement to it, so it's almost in the, they're kind of starting to cap right there. So it's very possible it's just the feed. Again, we didn't get a whole lot of natural forage, so I find it highly unlikely it's anything like that. But yeah, there's a lot of definitely seeing eggs in here. Our queen is definitely laying. She's not fully stopped, so this will be a prime candidate when I come back out in early February. If you've watched my previous video on my thoughts of double screen divider boards, I am a huge proponent of those. Easy way to make a walk-away split early, especially when you want to keep the heat. So we'll go into that later, or watch one of my older vids, but it's basically dividing 2 deep bodies to force one side to make a new queen. So like I said, that's looking pretty good. Let's just top them off real fast with some sugar, or some syrup, I should say. As I mentioned, this is 2 to 1. Probably is not going to be another feeding. Too cold for them to take it. So give them something to do. But this colony has a lot of weight. So, you know, at this point, it's not like they would need another feeding. And that's probably another reason why this queen is confident enough, based upon her laying that many eggs that I saw. They weren't capped over yet, but if she's up here laying, you know, the brood nest is going to slowly start to move up. She feels confident there's enough food in the hive for her to work with. So, other than that, looking really good. All right, so final thoughts. Let's see, not much to say. Very pleased overall with this yard. Just kind of want to go over some things for y'all to consider regarding feeding. There's more than one way to do it, and I know I've talked about that in other videos, but just a few ways that I've done it, and this has worked out pretty good for me. So kind of wanted to wrap up this video just by talking about lessons learned from the year. Obviously I didn't record very much content this year, didn't upload very much. There was once upon a time it was like every 2 weeks, every 3 weeks, and now it's become every 2-3 months sometimes that I put something up there. But I don't like making videos unless I've got something worth showing y'all, or something worth to say, and just let you know that I'm still out there. But big takeaways from the year, at least here in Georgia, I've definitely found that if you are trying to make a split of a colony past the end of May, so if you're trying to make splits or nucs in June, I just think it's more trouble than it's worth, personally. I think that to keep something like that going, if it's something that you have it on your property where you can go check on it regularly and you can nurse them up with, you know, feeding them a ton, you know, just boosting them through the summer, then great. But I don't have the ability to be checking on hives once a week or more than once a week. I check on my hives, you know, every 2 to 3 weeks sometimes now, just based upon demands of life and work and whatnot. And I just think you're going to be working a lot harder than you need to, and even then your chances of those hives being strong enough to go into the winter are very slim. I've done this for years. I've had so many hives that I've made into nucs in June, or split them in June and July and tried to get them where they need to be, and they either just don't build up in time or they don't put on enough weight, even with me feeding them. There's something to be said about these hives bringing in a lot of nectar and resources during the spring to get to where they need to be. And so that's my takeaway, is just be smart about when you make splits, and otherwise you're gonna be working a lot harder than you need to be. Another big takeaway is, and this is something I want to try next year, is I want to learn into using the OA extended release pads. It's something I want to look more into. I know there's been a lot of really good research and discussion on that, because, you know, here in Georgia, obviously it's very hot. You know, most of the US has had record heat the past few summers, and it is very hard to get a good mite treatment in that is going to keep your bees in a good spot going into the fall without something like that. Just to be honest, all of these hives, I think I mentioned I treated with formic recently, and I like treating with formic in like September or early October. It's always a good time for me, but I still had some losses that couldn't even make it to that point. And a lot of these hives had received their previous formic treatment in the spring. So I either need to learn to either do a spring formic treatment in like May, just to get one really late, or something else, because a lot of the summer things, like I'm gonna be honest, Apogard, while it's good, I don't even know if I'm gonna use that next year. I used it and it was fine, but I just, again, going back into more trouble than it's worth. I think there's probably smarter ways to do this. There's probably more efficient ways that you're not spending so much time in the field. I did a lot of OA vapor this summer, which is not something you're usually going to be doing in the summer, just because you're only going to get the phoretic mites. You're not going to get the mites under the caps, but I did it as a way to try to keep these hives alive. And obviously these ones are great, but I have others that didn't do so hot. So that's another takeaway, is just trying different treatments going into next year. Other than that, like I said, I was very pleased with the year. I didn't make a ton of hives. I'm kind of in the mindset of I'd rather make more bees than I would honey, and I will probably not change that mindset. I got a good amount. I got a couple 100 pounds of honey this year, and that was great, but it wasn't the goal. It was just something as like an afterthought of just something to do, because they had it. But as you can see, I mean, I'm leaving supers of honey. Most of it is just feed that, you know, it's going to be like sugar honey. It's not going to be like natural stuff that they're just going to feed on. Nothing that would ever be harvested, but I would rather leave them more. It's the amount of time it takes to feed these bees to keep them going, at least here in the Southeast. It's just it's too much work. Whereas some of my beekeeper friends in other parts of the country, some of y'all get like a actually really nice fall flow. Some of y'all get forage year, you know, all summer long. We just don't get that here really. So yeah, other than that, I was all very, very pleased. I hope I can maybe make one more video going into the end of the year, but it's also very possible I don't, because folks, to be honest, other than this, I mean, this is my final winter prep. Feeding them one last time, putting the emergency feed underneath the inner cover. If I come out here again, whether that's December or early January, it's just to top off that emergency feed and probably do an OA vapor treatment on all these hives, just because by that point it'll have been 2 to 3 months since their formic treatment. Be great to clean them up in the middle of winter. So hope you all enjoyed this. Like I said, I'll let you know if anything changes, if I can make some more content, but hope you got something from it. I hope you all had a good Halloween. Hope you all have a great Thanksgiving, and hope you all have a good holiday for Christmas as well. So take care, stay safe, catch you on the next one.